Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. Today's episode, we're going to be doing another Terrapin Brewing Company beer review. This is another sampler pack they have out now. This one, although it does have a Crunkle in it, is not an entire Crunkle series. This is a sampler pack out called their IPA Survival Kit. Terrapin is based out of Athens, Georgia. So we're going to be starting today with the Hopsecutioner. This one's been around a long time. I have had it before and it's been a really long time, but it's a high ABV IPA and is brewed with a bunch of really big bold hops. In fact, they have it printed on the can, giving you an idea. It's got Warrior, Chinook, Simcoe, Amarillo, Cascade, and Centennial. So those are all massive high alpha hops, which are really going to bitter this up, and nice high ABV on there. Going a little lighter from there, we're going to the Recreation Ale. This is a session IPA at 4.7% ABV. So without further ado, let's jump right in, starting off with the Hopsecutioner. All right, so jumping right in with the Hopsecutioner IPA. This is the biggest one of the bunch by a good margin, both in its hop profile and also in its ABV. So this one again, 7.3% ABV, Warrior, Chinook, Simcoe, Amarillo, Cascade, and Centennial hops. All very well-known high alpha acid content hops. If you don't know that much and you're just getting in IPAs, or it sounds like I'm speaking Greek, alpha acids are the acids that are found in hops that are responsible for producing the bitter sensation. It's what we perceive as IBUs from the hops come by and large from the alpha acids. So hop varieties that are higher in alpha acids tend to put forth a lot more bitter presence in a beer. So all of these are very high alpha acid hops, and you stick them all together, and hence they name Hopsecutioner. So let's go ahead and get this poured in the glass. I don't want to be too vigorous. It's already starting to get a pretty decent head. Just a little down the middle now. Yeah, that looks quite nice because that head's going to settle here in just a minute. Okay, so appearance-wise, it's a nice golden yellow color, slight hint of orangey amber to it, which means it may have a little deeper roasted, maybe a slight bit of some caramel malts in there, but overall it's more or less a deeper yellow color with just a tinge of orange. So it looks very nice, nice looking IPA. Formed a very nice head, really nice, tight, creamy looking head on there. It, you know, from a can, I've said this many times, I'll keep saying it. It's got a lot to do with the cleanliness of the glassware that you're using, and it's got a lot to do with how well or how poorly you pour the beer, the type of head that's going to form when you're pouring it home. If you're not on a tap where it's got, you know, a nitro or some other kind of forced induction system to give that nice consistent head as it pours into the glass, it's really a combination of dumb luck, how well you do it, and how clean you keep your equipment. This glass is squeaky clean, so I got a good opportunity to form that head, and it poured well. So let's give it a sniff. Yeah, you can smell that. It's got a very pronounced aroma, and it smells very big on the nose. This is such an interesting beer because it's got, although these are all high in alpha acids, they don't all have the exact same hop profile. So you get this very interesting eclectic mix of aromas that comes out. You get earthy hop notes, you get very citrusy hop notes, and you get very pine and pine resin and pine tar hop notes. And it's almost an equal abundance in here. Yeah, gosh, it smells so good. And just on the back of the hops, this is a 7.3% ABV IPA, so it's got some fermentables in there, and you can smell the base of the beer. It's not just hop. You can smell that kind of caramelly character in there, so it's really a delicious smelling beer. Head has settled down nicely. It looks great, still holding beautifully, so let's go ahead and have a sip and see what this is about. Oh, Oh, that's a nice beer. Oh, that's a very nice beer. Oh, that's a lovely hop profile. It really is. I haven't had this in such a long time, and this is a very, very good IPA. Yeah, there's nothing about this I dislike. It is super smooth. It's got a weight to it. As you know, it's got higher ABV, more fermentables, so it, generally speaking, is going to have a little more weight to it. And in this instance, it does. That's not always the case, but more often than not, it's true. And this does definitely have a nice weight to it in your mouth. You can feel it. It's got some heft. Silky smooth mouthfeel. It's not overly viscous, but these hops, they really stick to the palate and around the inside of the cheeks and the roof of the mouth. The hops that they use are so strong and so pungent, they just stick all around the mouth. Even though it's not a viscous beer, it's silky smooth. It doesn't stick. It's super smooth. But the combination of that nice medium weight of the beer and then the way that the hops all stick around your mouth and just let you keep tasting all of them independently, it's really nice. If you're a hop head, this is one I highly recommend. It's been many, many years since I've had it. I'm glad I got to try it again. It's a great beer. I'm going to take my time enjoying this one. We'll come back at the end and get the full rating. And coming up next, we have the Recreation Ale. That's their Session IPA, clocking in at 4.7% ABV. All right, moving on to our second beer in today's review. We move on to the Recreation Ale. This is the lowest ABV of the bunch as a Session IPA. This one clocks in at 4.7. Let's go ahead and get this cracked, pour it right in the glass. All right. Do my best to pour this well. Did the last one pretty well. Hopefully I can get this one as well. If you've watched many of my videos, you know that I am not the expert at pouring beers. I never purport to be. Yep, see, I got a little aggressive with the head there. That's okay. Still gonna try to get the last of that in the can in there. And aggressively poured and a big frothy foamy head aside, it actually is quite a lovely looking head. It's got a really nice looking foam. Almost looks like it did come off of a tap with that really creamy texture to the head. Holding it up to the light, this looks like a classic Session IPA. It's vigorously, vigorously carbonated. It is just coming up as fast as could be. Has a nice, pale, slightly golden color, but more of a pale yellow, which is rather what you expect typically with a Session IPA. They tend to use lighter roasted malts and fewer of them, which, you know, fewer fermentables, lowers the ABV. There's less sugars to convert into alcohol when the yeast starts to eat during the fermentation process. Doesn't necessarily have to be light. That's just kind of the traditional Session IPA color. Certainly you could have a Session beer that's made with very deeply roasted malts. It could be essentially pitch black and still only have a 4.7 or even lower. It's really all about volume. But in this case, this is very much the quintessential appearance of a classic Session IPA. I'm just going to give that just a little swirl in there, let that head dissipate a bit while I take a sniff here. It actually has a relatively pronounced aroma, which you don't get with a lot of Session IPAs. You can really smell the hop profile in here, which is quite nice. And it smells predominantly like very earthy hops with just a slight hint of a pine hop character. So I'm not sure exactly which specific hop varieties they used in this, but it does have a very nice aroma indeed. For a Session, it's quite pronounced. And it looks great, and that head is dissipated enough. I think I'm going to jump right in and see what this is about. Okay. I'll tell you what, this actually, I really enjoy this, but there is a caveat. The caveat is this does not taste particularly like most session IPAs I've had, and that's neither good nor bad. It actually puts me a lot more in mind of what a classic German or Czech Pilsner tastes like. This, if you blindfolded me and stuck this in a lineup of German and Czech Pilsners, or even American or other countries that are brewing in that style that make a very good example of a classic Czech or German Pilsner, I would be hard-pressed to not believe that this were one versus a session IPA. The hop profile that they use tastes very much like those classic German noble hops, some of those other classic Pilsner, European Pilsner hops that they use in there, and it's about the same quantity too. It's not vigorously bitter, but it's got that nice little hop bite in the back. And it is that earthy character to the hop, which is exactly how the German and Czech style Pilsners are. This is a really, really nice beer. I really enjoy it. It's super clean. Yeah, that's really nice. I would enjoy this on a hot summer day, no question about it. As you might expect, there is not a heavy body at all. It's quite light, which fewer fermentables, lower ABV. It's a nice light body. It's also got a very, very smooth mouthfeel. I wouldn't even say it's silky. I would say it's almost akin to drinking water or juice. It's just kind of liquid without much other presence or characteristic to go along with it, but it makes it ridiculously smooth. You know, you have a sniff of this, and then you have a sip of this. It's an absolute treat. Now, I am not against anybody that wants to brew a session IPA that essentially, if their benchmark is a German or Czech style Pilsner for the flavor profile, because I think it's fantastic. I've never had one like this, and there's nothing that says that your session IPA can't use that same hop profile or those same classic malts. By definition, it's still a session IPA based on how they brewed it, how many hops they put in there. It's just their process and how it all came out to be. It just so happens to taste, to me, very strongly of a German or Czech Pilsner, which is legitimately one of my favorite beer styles in the world. So this, for me, is a home run. Whether or not the average session IPA enthusiast would think likewise, that's not for me to say. Everybody has their own likes and dislikes, and my job here is just to describe to you unabashedly what it is I'm experiencing and what I personally think. I happen to like this very much. I've had session IPAs that are a lot weaker than this, with a lot less presence and a lot less flavor. I've also had many that were a lot more pungent. I have brewed my own session IPA that was ridiculously hopped. It was as hoppy as any super hopped standard or double IPA I've ever had. So it is possible. But there is such a delicate balance in this beer. I really, really enjoy it. I'm going to take my time sipping on this while I go gather my scores. All right, now that we have gotten to enjoy all four of these beers, we're going to go through and get their full rankings, starting with the Terrapin Hopsecutioner. This is their highest ABV at 7.3. This is a standard IPA, but has many big high alpha acid bittering hops in this beer. And certainly this beer had the most presence of the bunch by quite a substantial margin from an IPA perspective. Starting off with the aroma, it was really nice. You could tell it was going to be special out of the gate. You got a lot of different aromas that came through from the blend of hops, and it had a really big nose. I gave it an 8 out of 10 there. For the taste, really, really enjoyable. I mimicked the aroma. I gave that an 8 as well. For the body, 7.3% ABV. You would expect with that many fermentables in there that it's going to bump up the body with a little more substance, and it had a decent substance, it had a decent body, but considering how high the ABV got, I actually expected it to be quite a bit bigger. It was still nice, still above average, but I just gave it a 7 for the body. Moving on to the mouthfeel, I mentioned this before, body and mouthfeel often go hand in hand, though they're not always the same. In this case, I thought they were. I gave the mouthfeel a 7. The finish on this was very nice. It was rather long, and you know, don't want to say it was overly layered, but you did still get to pick out the malt bill that went into the beer, and then a boatload of hops, and it really lingered and lingered. So I give the finish an 8 out of 10. The head and retention on this, really in all of these, it came down to how I poured, but they all kept a nice head. They formed true, even though I poured most of them poorly and it bloomed up quite higher than you would like. Once it finally settled itself, it really held true. I give that a 9 out of 10 for the head and the retention on this one. The appearance, this was almost picture perfect textbook IPA for me. I gave that also a 9 out of 10. For the balance, I thought it was very well balanced. Considering this is supposed to be a big hop forward IPA, I thought it did a very good job of delivering on that mission, and gave it an 8 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, I gave it the same thing, 8 out of 10, well above average. I really enjoyed this beer. Finally, getting to the example of the style category. As a big IPA, I thought it was very nice, certainly well above average. Is it absolute top tier, upper echelon, really hop-centric IPAs? No, but is it certainly well above average? Yes, it is. I gave it an 8 out of 10 there. That brings the total score on Hopsecutioner up to an 80 out of 100. So again, well above average beer. If you like big, bold, very hop-forward, bitter IPAs, this is one definitely worth seeking. Moving on to number 2, the Recreation Ale. This is the Session IPA, 4.7% ABV on this one. Starting out, the aroma was very nice. You could pick it up, and it wasn't as pronounced in some of the other beers in this lineup, but considering it's a session, I thought it had a very pronounced aroma on the nose for the style. So I gave that above average. I gave that an 8 out of 10. The taste, I was torn on this one because I've had more flavor-forward session IPAs than this, and I've had most of them kind of are like an IPA light. This wasn't quite the same. As I mentioned, this really reminded me strongly of Czech or German style classic Pilsner. And that for me was a huge positive. It's one of my favorite styles. And considering that it was a session IPA with lower ABV, I really thought on it, and I think it deserves the 9 that I gave it. You could make an argument that a session IPA could have many character traits that a Czech or German Pilsner would have, including hop selection and the types of malt used. But session IPA it is, and I really enjoyed it. 9 out of 10. The body on this, very nice for a session IPA. It had a bit more weight than I would have anticipated. I thought it was well above average. I gave it an 8 out of 10. The mouthfeel on there, really nice as well, above average, but not quite to the same level of the body. I gave it a 7 out of 10, but still a high score. The finish on this was just okay. Session IPAs, they can go kind of hit or miss and run the gamut. I've had many that were session. Just because they're low ABV doesn't mean that finish is going to be long or disappointing. And this wasn't disappointing, but it was just average. I gave it a 5 out of 10. The head and retention, same as on the Hopsecutioner, for the same reasons. I give it a 9 out of 10. For the appearance, this was textbook, picture perfect session IPA. I give it a perfect score, 10 out of 10. The balance on this was very nice. You could absolutely pick out the malt bill. You could absolutely pick out the hops, and the interplay between the two was very nice. Exceptionally well balanced beer. I gave it a 9 out of 10. My feeling and intangible, my subjective, probably because I'm such a big fan of German and Czech style Pilsners and it reminded me of one so much. I thought it was such an interesting treat for a session IPA, and I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. I loved it. Finally, as an example of the style, I thought it was well above average. I've had much more flavorful and forward session IPAs, but I still think this one is deserving of the 8 that it got. So the final score on this one comes up to an 83 out of 100, which, again, my scoring, if you're noticing this is 3 points higher than a Hopsecutioner, how could that be? It's a session. Well, it's because I'm ranking based on the style, so please keep that in mind. As a session IPA, I think it is well above average and well deserving of the score. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I do thank you for tuning in today. We are a growing channel, so please, if you enjoyed this content, found some value, consider liking and subscribing. And if you want to keep in the loop when our videos go live, we're dropping multiple videos per week. You can click the notification bell and it will let you know right when our videos go live. Certainly, if you have another fellow beer enthusiast or lover in your life, feel free to share this content with them. And we really do appreciate it. And hopefully you found some value, at least found it mildly entertaining. But until next time, folks, we thank you for tuning in. Keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.